Chapter 6, the integumentary system. The integumentary system, which is the largest organ system, consists of your skin. There are 3 layers of your skin that you should be familiar with. Your epidermis, the dermis, which is a connective tissue layer made up of a connective tissue layer. And you also have the hypodermis, which is technically not a part of the skin, but it's studied in conjunction with your skin. Glands consist of your accessory organs would be your hair, your nails, and your glands. Don't get that confused with the layers of your skin. Of course, it's the most vulnerable organ, as you can see. It's exposed to radiation, ultraviolet radiation, the sun, which can lead to skin cancer that we will talk about in this chapter. Trauma. There's a lot more injury to the skin than any other system. Infectious bacteria or fungi can actually penetrate the skin, as well as chemicals such as pesticides, household chemicals, and things of that sort. The study of the skin, of course, is dermatology. Medical treatment of the integumentary system and scientific study of the skin is a way to study the skin. This picture right here, which is in your textbook on page 182, of course, will be on your exam, figure 6.1. So knowing the structures of the skin, what makes up the skin, is very important. As you can see, the dermis, of course, is your thickest layer. The epidermis, of course, which is your tight layer. Your top layer has sweat pores or pores on top. You can see the hairs, or the shaft of the hairs, which of course is actually the part that we can actually see. And below the dermis you have the hypodermis, which of course is just a lot of adipose tissue or fat cells, the yellowish color, which is called the subcutaneous fat, which we studied in chapter 5. You also have a network of blood vessels in that bottom layer. Of course, most of your glands, such as your sebaceous gland, your sweat glands, the hair follicle, the hair bulb, the root, of course, receptors for the hair, of course, is in the dermis. And you have the sensory nerve fibers that run from the hypodermis all the way up to the through the dermis. So just know the parts. The American sweat gland, of course, is there. The piloerector muscle, of course, is in the dermis as well, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. As I stated, it's the largest and heaviest organ system. Here are your 2 layers, the epidermis and your dermis. The top, we know, is stratified squamous epithelium, non-keratinized. And, of course, the dermis, of course, is your dense irregular connective tissue. There are a lot of colored photos in this chapter that I'm just going to bypass or ignore, but you can look at them at your leisure. Know the difference between your thick skin and your thin skin, and where locations on the body that you will find each one. Your thick skin, of course, the relative thickness of your skin, of course, is due to that dead layer of the stratum corneum, which is your top layer, or the more superficial layer of the epidermis. So you have it in the palms of your hands, your fingers, your toes, and of course the soles of your feet. In this particular area of the body, you do have sweat glands, but you don't have the hair follicles, you don't have the sebaceous glands, but we do have sweat glands because people often sweat in the palms of their hands, and people often sweat on the soles of their feet. The rest of the body, of course, is thin skin, which, as you can see, has the hair follicles, the sebaceous glands, as well as your sweat gland. Of course, with this particular area, the stratum corneum is not very thick in this particular area. The thinnest skin, of course, is around your eye. That's where skin is the thinnest. The signs of aging often occur The first signs of aging often occur around the eyes when you get the crow's feet. Know the functions of your skin, resistance to trauma, other barrier functions, vitamin D synthesis, sensation and thermoregulation, and nonverbal communication. Resistance to trauma and infection. Here, because we're more prone to trauma or injuries to the top layer of our skin, the epidermis, of course, has a protein which is keratin. The keratin, of course, is a tough, very, very tough, durable protein that covers the top layer of the skin. Of course, the reason is it's also prevents water from being lost from the skin. So the reason we have it is to protect the skin from bacteria, fungi, or anything that can actually penetrate the skin. In conjunction with your keratin, you have the acid mantle. The pH of our skin, of course, is very, very low, as you can see, between 4 and 6. And certain defensive antimicrobial peptides called dermacidin or defensins. This is an agent that's often found in the sweat, in our sweat, that has antimicrobial agents, or it actually keeps microbial organisms, harmful ones, from actually penetrating the skin, or it kills them before they can actually penetrate the skin. You have other barriers. As I stated earlier, the keratin plays a major role in waterproofing the skin. Doesn't allow too much water to leave the skin. Doesn't allow too much to actually penetrate or come into across the barrier of the epidermis. Ultraviolet radiation, of course, the top layer of your skin acts as a parasol by blocking the rays of the sun, which of course can lead to skin cancer. And of course, it prevents harmful chemicals, as I stated earlier, such as pesticides, household chemicals, lead, arsenic, things of that sort, from actually penetrating the skin. As you can see, it is permeable to several drugs and poisons. They mention drugs and poisons. There are a lot of patches on the market now that will allow drugs to penetrate the skin. They have patches for smoking, patches for different heart conditions. I think in your textbook, you have transdermal absorption, which is on page 182 of your textbook. It talks about how certain chemicals can be absorbed across the skin. And it mentions the patches. Vitamin D synthesis, of course, the skin, of course, is the first step in the production of vitamin D, or the synthesis of vitamin D, of course, which is needed for bone development and maintenance, followed by your liver and your kidneys. We're going to talk about calcitriol, which is a hormone, later on in the semester, I think probably in chapter 7, where it's also responsible for the production of vitamin D as well. Sensation. Our skin is our most extensive sense organ. As you can see, we have sensory neurons in our skin. Lots of a network of neurons. We have Merocrine glands. We have pain receptors in our skin that allows us to respond to pain. You have the Pacinian corpuscles, the Merocrine, and of course the Pacinian and the Meissner corpuscles, of course, are responsible for very, very light touch as well as deep pressure. We can actually, it helps us having those sensory neurons. The skin, of course, is prone or more susceptible to reacting to heat, cold, touch, texture, pressure, vibration, and tissue injury. And it tells you where that there are certain parts of the body where you're going to have a large supply of these sensory neurons. Thermoregulation we talked about a little bit in Chapter 1 or Atlas A. You have what you call thermoreceptors, little receptors in the skin that monitors hot and cold or the temperature of the skin. We've already mentioned vasoconstriction and vasodilation, where when your blood vessels constrict, you're going to retain the heat. That's when your body temperature drops too low, and it keeps the warm blood deeper in the skin. And of course, when you have vasodilation, of course, the blood vessels are going to dilate. The blood is going to rush to the surface, and of course, you're going to lose excess heat, and it's going to actually cause you to sweat, and of course, it's going to bring your body temperature back to where it should be. You have your nonverbal communication, acne, birthmarks, scars, lots of skeletal muscles in the face that allows one to that will contract, that actually inserts on the dermis, and of course leads to all of the facial expressions that we make. And transdermal absorption, administration of certain drugs to the skin via adhesive patches. Okay, the top layer, which is called your dermis, of course, like I say, is packed with this tough protein, which is keratin. It's avascular. There are no blood vessels in the top layer of our skin. Any nutrients, of course, has to come by way of the dermis via the dense irregular connective tissue. There are 5 types of cells of the epidermis that you should be familiar with. You have the stem cells. These are cells that have no function. They're undifferentiated cells, but they will lead to your keratinocytes, which are your skin cells. These stem cells, of course, if you look on page 183, figure 6.1, they're in a very, very deep layer of the epidermis, which is your stratum basale. One other thing that you need to remember about the stratum basale is the deepest layer. The rays from the sun can penetrate this particular area or go to the deep layer of the epidermis, causing basal cell carcinoma, which of course is a form of skin cancer that we're going to talk about a little bit later. You also have your keratinocytes. Now the keratinocytes, these right here, they're going to undergo a lot of cell division will occur among these cells. They're responsible for synthesizing or creating or making the keratin protein. Melanocytes. Melanocytes, of course, if you look in your textbook, it looks like a little chocolate Hershey's Kiss. It's in your stratum basale as well. So you've got your keratinocytes in the deep layer of your skin. You've got your melanocytes in the deep layer of your skin as well. You've got your tactile cells, which are your receptor cells for touch, which of course is a part of looks like it may be a part of the stratum spinosum. But your melanocytes, they're responsible for making the pigment melanin, which of course gives the skin the brown to black color that it has. It protects the skin. If you have a higher concentration of melanin, it's going to protect the skin or your DNA from ultraviolet radiation, the type A and the type B rays, which is a good thing. And because, like I say, it acts as a parasol, and of course it's spread out among your keratinocytes, which actually gives the keratinocytes, those skin cells, the color to it. On page 184, it talks about where your keratinocytes, they phagocytize fragments, melanin-containing fragments, and accumulate melanin granules on the sunny side of the nucleus. Like a parasol, the pigment shields the DNA from ultraviolet radiation. So it protects the DNA. Your melanocytes do. Melanin, of course, is that brown to black pigment. We all have it, all races, but we differ Make sure you understand melanin. Make sure you read about it, because there's a question or two on your exam. It gives us the color to our the pupil of the eye. Of course, it gives color to our hair. There are a couple of pictures throughout in your chapter where it talks about eumelanin and pheomelanin. Eumelanin, of course, gives the dark brunette colored hair, or the brown to black color to the hair. And of course, pheomelanin is more common in redheads and people that have the blonde hair. All races, of course, have the melanin producing cell, which is cells which are called melanocytes. But however, all races, African American, American Indian, of course, Asian Americans, Caucasians, we all have it, but we differ in the amount that we synthesize, or how much we actually produce. Your tactile or your Merkel cells, these are receptor cells for touch. They're also a part of the epidermis as well. Dendritic cells, you need to be familiar with. That's the large green cell on page 183 of your textbook. This cell right here is very important because it destroys toxins, pathogens, and things of that sort. And it's found in actually the stratum spinosum and your stratum granulosum, as you can see. So it's a little bit up, a little bit higher than the stratum basale, this particular type of cell. And what it does, it actually alerts the immune system when any type of harsh chemical or harmful microbial organism tries to penetrate the skin. So as your textbook states, they stand guard against toxin, microbes, and other pathogens that penetrate the skin. When they detect such invaders, they alert the immune system so the body can defend itself. Okay, so here you have it, and of course, know the layers and know that the deepest layer is your stratum basale. The more superficial layer is your stratum corneum. As you can see, as the layers of those keratinocytes start moving up, they're getting flatter, and in the stratum lucidum, you can see how they've turned a really, really dark color. That's because the cells are now dying, and by the time they reach the top, which is your stratum corneum, they're dead cells, and that's when we shed the top layer of our skin. You can see to the right you have the exfoliating keratinocytes. That's when every 60 to 90 days or every 2 weeks we shed the top layer of the skin. Although it takes a couple of weeks for it to actually get to the top, it takes a couple more weeks before it actually sloughs off. So here are your cells in your stratum basale. Like I said, in the stratum basale, you're going to have a lot of keratinocytes that are actually undergoing cell division a lot, because they have to replace those cells that we actually shed from the stratum corneum. The stratum spinosum, on the other hand, this particular one, which is the second layer, this particular layer is susceptible to getting cancer as well. Here, that's when your keratinocytes, they start to get a little bit flat in this particular layer. It's the keratin filaments causes the cells to flatten. They're higher up in this stratum. The flatter the cells appear. Here you have your dendritic cells found here. Of course, you have these cells, of course, they shrink. They have a spiny appearance to them. And the reason when you stain them or color them, they're going to actually, the keratinocytes, they shrink or they take on a spiny appearance. which is why they shrink. But the cells, they remain intact. They don't come apart because you have a junction, which are called the desmosomes, that actually keep each cell kind of held together. And it creates a bridge for each cell. So no, the stratum spinosum, the reason it's called spinosum or it's spiny in appearance is because the keratinocytes, they shrink when, of course, they're stained. Thickest stratum in most skin. The deepest cells remain capable of mitosis. The stratum granulosum, which is a layer up from your stratum spinosum, here you have those keratohyalin granules that makes a lot of that pigment or large amounts of keratin. Here, the cells, as you can see, they're even flatter, 3 to 5 layers of flat keratinocytes. Here, this particular layer, the stratum granulosum promotes dehydration. And here, the nucleus is going to disintegrate, and the cells are going to eventually die. And this one is more common in thick skin than in thin skin. The stratum lucidum, as you can see, there's not a whole lot about this one. It has the ellatin, which is a protein, and the reason the palms of our hands and the soles of our feet have no color to them is because of the ellatin, this is a very transparent layer. It's a thin, translucent layer. It's found only in your thick skin, the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet. So the ellatin, which is a protein that has no color to it. In this particular layer, you have no nucleus. You don't have any organelles. So it gives a pale color to the skin. And, of course, your stratum corneum, 30 layers of what? Dead, scaly, keratinized cells. And like I said, it helps. The reason you have this keratin or this particular layer right here, it allows it increases water absorption, is resistant to abrasion, penetration of things trying to cross the barrier of the epidermis, as well as it prevents water or retards water loss. Here, the stratum corneum, it mentions in your textbook, make sure you read about the history of your keratinocytes. Oftentimes when you linger around or your fingers or in your hands are in a lot of water, or you linger, you take a bubble bath or something, the toes, you get the little prickly or pruned fingers or the pruned toes where the distal ends are a little wrinkly. That's because the stratum corneum is actually the part that actually causes the wrinkling of the fingers and the toes. Here, the cells, they slough off or they exfoliate. Here, the life history of the keratinocytes, starting on page 184, dead cells constantly flake off the skin. A lot of times, the little specks of white specks that you see in the air, these dead skin cells that we shed, of course, we often shed them because we're shedding it so much. We can shed them on our sheets. Those little dead cells, oftentimes the dust that we see on our furniture is just dead skin cells. They can penetrate the carpet, and of course, studies indicate that asthma, there's been increase in asthma or allergies because of those little dust mites which are called dermatophagous, which is on page 185 of your textbook. They're the ones that feed on the dead skin that we shed, and of course when we inhale the feces, that can cause the asthma or trigger an asthma attack, or we can have an allergic reaction to it. So, like I said, these cells are constantly dividing. Because this layer, of course, It's avascular. We have to get nutrients and things of that sort from the underlying connective tissue, which is your dermis. So, of course, in 30 to 40 days, a keratinocyte makes its way to the skin surface and what? It's going to flake off. Of course, it really takes about 2 weeks for it to reach the corneum. So it's going to remain there for an additional 2 weeks, which, of course, will give you the 30 to 40 days. Mechanical stress, of course, as we age, you're going to have a slower rate of the skin actually flaking off. Which explains why, the soles of your feet in old age or in elderly people, the skin is very, very thick because mitosis is not occurring at a faster rate, or it slows down as we age, and the skin is not being shed as fast when you start aging. It's faster in injured or stressed skin. The calluses or corns, of course, it's just a thick accumulation of dead keratinocytes on the hands or the feet. People that do a lot of manual labor get the calluses. People that wear the tight-fitting shoes get the corns on the toes. And, of course, it gets really, really hard, those calluses and corns, and that's because you have just an accumulation of those dead keratinocytes. Stratum granulosum. There are 3 important developments about the stratum granulosum. Here, as I told you earlier, the stratum granulosum, of course, is a water barrier. It's actually between the stratum, there's a water barrier between the stratum granulosum and, of course, the stratum lucidum. The cells, of course, they degenerate. The nucleus and the organelles degenerate. And, of course, the cells, they're really flat, and they're just starting to get really, really flat because they're getting ready to die. Mitosis slows down when it comes to this particular layer as well. It has an epidermal water barrier, as you can see, between the stratum spinosum as well as the stratum granulosum. So that stratum granulosum, of course, it prevents dehydration or water loss. Those cells that are above the stratum granulosum, of course, they die quicker because they're actually being cut off from the nutrients. So dander, of course, which is just a form of dandruff, of course, it's just clumps of dander stuck together by sebum or oil that's secreted by your sebaceous glands. So, like I stated earlier, because they're cut off from the nutrients, the keratinocytes, they die, and of course they eventually flake off. The second layer of your skin, of course, is your dermis. This is your connective tissue layer beneath the epidermis. As I stated earlier, it's 0.2 millimeters thick around your eyelids, and of course, it's a little bit thicker around the palms and the soles of the feet. So you have here those fibers, elastic fibers that we talked about in Chapter 5. You have the reticular fibers here as well. This is where the dermis, of course, is often the layer that thins as we start aging, and that's when you get the wrinkling and the sagging skin. So you have a rich supply of blood vessels here, as you can see. Sweat glands, sebaceous glands. You have sensory nerve endings here. You have your hair follicles. You have your nail roots. A lot of the accessory organs or structures, as you can see, is located in the dermis. Skeletal muscle fibers, of course, connect to the collagen fibers of the dermis, and like I said, gives us the diverse facial expressions that we often make via nonverbal communication. This piloerector muscle you need to be familiar with, which is located in the dermis as well. If you look at figure 6.1, you can see that there's a hair follicle connected to this particular muscle, because if you're really, really cold, or if you're afraid or someone touches you, sometimes you get the little goosebumps and the hairs stand on end in an erect position. Has no function in us, but it does have functions in certain animals. But of course, it has no function, no really necessary function, but it's just that it allows us to respond to certain stimuli or stimulus, causing the hairs to stand in an erect position. So the piloerector muscle is somewhere in your textbook. I don't know. You also have the little friction ridges on your fingertips, the dermal papillae, which is a part of the dermis. Of course, it actually projects up into the epidermis, and you have the epidermal ridges, which of course, those are little ridges that are part of the epidermis, and of course, they actually project downward into the dermis. So it's like kind of like a connection between the dermal papillae and the epidermal ridges. So those little finger-like extensions of the dermis, the friction ridges, like I say, we have them on our fingertips. They're actually a part of the stratum basale, and as I say, they extend up into the dermis. It increases friction on our fingertips, allows us to grip things. And of course, they are those little friction ridges. They are the basis for fingerprints as well. Okay, the papillary layer, you need to know the difference between the two. The papillary layer, which is, of course, you have both of them on page 186 of your textbook, is the more superficial layer. It increases the mobility of white blood cells. So anytime you have a nick or the skin, of course, becomes broken, the leukocytes, of course, they rush to that particular area, the papillary layer. There are a lot of blood vessels there, and of course they protects any type of bacteria or fungi that could perhaps try and invade that particular layer. So you have your white blood cells in that particular area. There is a deeper layer which is called the reticular layer. This is where we get the stretch marks, the striae. That's your dense irregular connective tissue layer. As you can see, stretch marks, of course, those are actually tears in the collagen fiber. It's common in people that are overweight or obese, pregnant women as well. So when those collagen fibers tear and they actually repair themselves, they leave behind those little stretch marks. So it's really overstretching of your skin. Make sure you read the reticular layer. In the reticular layer, the collagen forms thicker bundles with less room for ground substance. And there's small clusters of adipocytes, which are your fat cells. Stretching of the skin in obesity and pregnancy can tear the collagen fibers and produce striae or stretch marks. These occur especially in areas most stretched by weight gain, the thigh, the buttocks, your abdomen, and of course your breast. So the dermis, this particular layer, it can't recoil back because that layer has become damaged. The hypodermis, which of course is called your subcutaneous layer, more areolar and adipose than your dermis. You have fat cells here, gives you some of the function. It pads the body and binds organs or skin to underlying tissue. It's called your subcutaneous layer as well because it has the subcutaneous fat, which is an energy reservoir. Triglycerides are on reserve there. Thermal insulation occurs in this particular layer. And of course, women have more of this subcutaneous fat than men because it's typically found in certain parts of the body, such as your breast, the abdomen, your hips, and your thighs. Subcutaneous injections, drugs are introduced into this particular layer. You have a network of blood vessels, arteries, veins, as you can see. And the blood, of course, is going to be absorbed. The medicine, of course, is absorbed quickly or quicker because of this particular layer that's highly vascular. Skin color, melanin, most significant factor in skin color produced by your your melanocytes. Your melanocytes are responsible for, as I stated earlier, manufacturing melanin. The pigment is actually going to be transferred over to your keratinocytes, and it gives the color to your keratinocytes. In dark-skinned people, we have what you call the melanosomes, which is a little vesicle that actually carries or houses the melanin. They're a little bit larger as opposed to someone that has fair skin. They're showing you in your textbook how the melanin differs on page 188 between the dark-skinned person and the light-skinned person. In the little African-American girl, you can see that they're a little bit more spread out. Of course, melanin breaks down slower in us. In the little light-skinned Caucasian boy, they're more clumped together. He's got fewer of them, and of course, they're going to break down faster, which is why a tan fades pretty quickly because that melanin breaks down faster, and also we shed the top layer of skin as well, which means that if you get suntans or things like that, you have to constantly get them. That is the reason why. You have the eumelanin, as I stated earlier. You have your pheomelanin that gives the color to the hair as well. So you can study that on page 192 of your textbook, where there's a variation. They're showing you the different variations of hair color due to the eumelanin and, of course, your pheomelanin. Of course, gray hair does not have any because your melanocytes stop producing melanin. And so if you look at the medulla of the person with gray hair, There's just a lot of empty space, and with the cortex around it. So gray hair, as we age, the hair turns gray, or because you're not producing melanocytes like you once did. So eumelanin, brownish to black. Pheomelanin, a reddish yellow sulfur containing what? Pigment. Page 187, skin color. People of different skin colors have essentially the same number of melanocytes, but in dark skin, people of different skin colors have essentially the same number, but in dark skin, the melanocytes produce greater quantities of what? Melanin. The melanin granules in the keratinocytes are more spread out than tightly clumped, and the melanin breaks down more slowly in dark-skinned people. Melanocyte cells may be seen throughout the epidermis, from the stratum basale to the stratum corneum. In light skin, the melanin is clumped near the keratinocyte nucleus, so it imparts less color to the cells. It also breaks down more rapidly, so little of it is seen beyond the stratum basale, if even there. So that's why people that are fair-skinned, even light-skinned African-American people, the melanin is not actually penetrating or coming through the layers of the epidermis, as opposed to someone that has a little bit more or produces a little bit more melanin. Skin color varies with exposure to ultraviolet rays of sunlight, which stimulates melanin synthesis and darkens the skin. A suntan fades as melanin is degraded in older keratinocytes, and as the keratinocytes migrate to the surface and what? Exfoliate. The amount of melanin varies substantially from place to place on the body. It is relatively concentrated in freckles and moles on the dorsal surfaces of the hands and feet, as compared with the palms and soles on the nipple and surrounding areola of the breast, around the anus, on the scrotum and penis, and on the lateral surfaces of the female genital folds, the labia majora. So certain parts of the body, as you can see, of course, or areas of the regions of the body, of course, is a little bit darker because you have a higher concentration of what? Melanin. Moles, freckles, the dorsal surface of the palms of the hand, your soles of your feet, things of that sort. So here they're talking about dark-skinned people that I just mentioned. The melanin breaks down a little bit more slowly, and it's seen through the 5 layers of the epidermis, and we produce a lot more melanin as opposed to any other race, races that are fair-skinned. Light-skinned people, the melanin breaks down more rapidly, and little is seen beyond what? The stratum basale. Exposure to the rays of sunlight, of course, increases the production in the synthesis of melanin, which causes the skin to become a little bit darker. There are other pigments that are under the heading of skin color too, which is hemoglobin. If you have pink to red undertones in your skin, of course you have hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, of course, is a red pigment, which is a protein. It's responsible for transporting oxygen through the body. So you have a higher network of blood vessels here that actually will allow you to see the reddish to pinkish hues to the skin that actually penetrates the skin. Keratin, on the other hand, people that have yellow undertones or gold undertones, they have a little bit more keratin. Keratin, of course, is found in some of the vegetables that we eat. Yolks, yellow orange vegetables such as carrots, bell peppers, and squash and things of that sort. Of course, you're going to have a higher, it gives that color to the stratum corneum. Sometimes corns and calluses can take on a yellowish looking color because that keratin, of course, is a little bit more concentrated in the stratum corneum as well as the subcutaneous fat. Cyanosis, you need to know what that is. This blueness of your skin, because there's not enough oxygen circulating in the body. People that go into cardiac arrest is common in people that have lung diseases, someone that's choking or drowning. Of course, sometimes the skin can take on a bluish color. Erythema, which is excessive redness of the skin due to your dilated cutaneous vessels. When you exercise, people that are fair skinned, of course, the skin will take on a reddish looking color, or becomes very, very flushed looking, like your cheeks or your face. Being in hot weather can cause those blood vessels to dilate and give the reddish color to the skin. Sunburns, of course, will lead to the reddish color of the skin, embarrassment, and things of that sort. What happens is the blood is kind of pooling together, and it kind of rushes to the surface when you can actually see it penetrating through the top layer of the skin, the epidermis, which of course you have the red color. Pallor, of course, is just paleness of the skin. People that are anemic, have low blood pressure, of course, they can take on a pale ashen color. Albinism, of course, you need to know what that is. Genetic lack of melanin that results in white hair, the pale skin, and the pink eyes. Albinism, of course, can affect any race. You don't have the amino acid tyrosine. It's a recessive gene. You have non-functional tyrosinase allele. Tyrosinase, of course, is the enzyme that's responsible for producing the amino acid tyrosine, which, of course, albinos lack, which means they cannot produce the melanin, because tyrosine, which is the amino acid, is responsible for the production of melanin. Jaundice, you need to be familiar with, which is yellowing of the skin and sclera of the eyes, because you have a buildup of bilirubin in the blood. Cirrhosis of the liver, people with certain cancers, hepatitis A, B, or C, any type of liver function can cause jaundice. Hematoma, of course, is just a bruise, a clotted blood that's showing through a mass of clotted blood showing through the skin. Read about the evolution of skin color on page 188. Of course, it's just FYI. Of course, the information will not be on your exam. So I'm going to stop here, and there's going to be a part 2 of the skin markings. I'll complete the rest of the chapter with a part 2 to chapter 6.